In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abracast. You know me, I'm John Towers. Welcome to Book Club Wednesday here at the Abracast. We're still chipping our way through Thus Spake Zarathustra, which is the, I don't know if it's proper to say, it's Nietzsche's magnum opus. But every once in a while, we do lessons of Thus Spake Zarathustra, and this is kind of where we get off of the actual text of the book and kind of like break down these speeches that he's giving. So this is, we haven't done one in a while, so we're going to go back, I think, maybe 3 of the regular episodes to kind of catch up with where we are with the lessons we're going to be talking about this evening. And it's, if you're playing along, we're starting with the child with the mirror. And the way that these episodes are broken down is I went back and I found 3 different sources and I just hit these 3 sources. It's the Zarathustra summary on Sparknotes. I found Existentialism in Thus Spake Zarathustra Paper online. So that's the second one. And then the last one is basically just like a straight up and down summary of it. And that's from Grade Saver. So as I'm going through here, when the first part I read and then the existentialism part and then the Grade Saver portion. So when I used to do these things live, it was all this experiment to do it live, like Bill O'Reilly. I would have listeners that would clock in on the chat feature and they'd be like, yes, but how do you become the overman? Zarathustra's running around telling everyone they got to become the overman. And this is kind of where I think we kind of peel the speech apart and sort of get to what do they say? How the sausage is made. This is how the overman is made. So we're going to jump right into this. Look, man, dude, I did good. It's not even 4 minutes in yet. If you're playing along at home today, now is the time where you summon your vessel of the art and you fill it with your favorite weapon of mass distraction. 99.9% of the time, mine is filled with a jinn jihad, as it is this evening. And this is, we'll raise a toast. We're going to toast to my Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. Thank you guys out there. I appreciate it. And yeah, all right, let's go. Here's to you. The child with the mirror. Back on his mountain, Zarathustra dreams of a child showing him a mirror in which he sees the face of a devil, and realizing that his enemies are perverting his teachings. And full of new need to share his wisdom, Zarathustra descends from the mountain and returns to the people. The Existentialism Paper says on Zarathustra returns to his mountain and the solitude of his cave, and he is startled by a dream in which he looks into a mirror carried by a child. And he's startled because he sees in the mirror not himself, but a devil. As Zarathustra interprets this dream, his teachings are in danger of being misunderstood. Quote, "My teaching is in danger. Weeds pose as wheat, and my enemies have grown powerful. And I have distorted my teachings till those dearest to me must be ashamed of the gifts I gave them. I have lost my friends. The hour has come to seek my lost ones." Unquote. Zarathustra decides that he must go down again to his friends and even his enemies. He knows that his wild wisdom may frighten his friends. They may even want to run from it along with his enemies. Gradesaver says, the first speech of the second section begins much like part one did. Zarathustra, having left his disciples at the end of part one, returns to his solitary mountain and stays there for many years. Although he is lonely, he grows in his wisdom. However, he has a dream in which a child comes to him with a mirror, and Zarathustra looks into the mirror. And instead of seeing his reflection, he sees only a devil's grimace and scornful laughter. He interprets this dream to mean his teachings are in danger, and the enemies of his teachings have distorted his thoughts and led his disciples astray. His disciples are not mirroring his teachings in the correct way, which means the Overman will not become a reality. Zarathustra then begins to speak to the snake and to the eagle on his mountain, and he has broken his self-imposed silence, and he feels that it is necessary. He begins to use descriptive imagery to describe his return. He compares himself to a lake pouring into the sea and a warrior preparing to go into battle. He takes joy not in the fact that he will be returning to his friends, but also in the fact that he must destroy his enemy. Zarathustra knows that his anger will reinvigorate his teachings, even though his disciples might even be afraid of him. Zarathustra then leaves the mountain to return to mankind to give a new kind of wisdom to his disciples. A wild wisdom. So this whole thing, if you recall, or if you go back and listen to the first episodes, this whole thing started because of I was watching I was rewatching the first season of True Detective, and I became obsessed with this line where one of the crazy hillbilly dudes, when they storm the compound, one of the crazy guys says, "Time is a flat circle." And Rushton Cole looks at him and goes, "What is that? What is that, Nietzsche?" And I was like, what does that even mean? So I started digging around, and the time is a flat circle. After that, by the way, on the show, they do a lot of time focusing on flat circles. You get to see records slamming down in jukeboxes. They pay special attention to round bar tables. There's round flat circles everywhere after that part of the show. But so I started getting into this Nietzschean idea of eternal reoccurrence, and the fact that the second part of the book, this is the first speech of the second part of the book, picks up exactly where the beginning of the book starts, where Zarathustra decides for whatever reason that he's got to come down the mountain. And if you remember in the first part, I mean, it's got to be like episode 1, part 1, on the, he goes down, or maybe it's I think it's part 1. He goes down, he does his, down going, and he's going down his mountain, and he runs into an old forest wizard, and the old forest wizard remembers the last time he came down. And so this is interesting because we're picking up basically, this is another example that Nietzsche writes into Zarathustra of this eternal reoccurrence. So I love it. The next speech we're going to talk about is upon the Blessed Isles. Zarathustra equates the creative will with freedom. I believe this. A belief in God inhibits creativity because a creative God would leave nothing left for us to create. The Existentialism Paper goes on to say, hold on. Upon arriving at the Blessed Isle where his friends are, Zarathustra begins to review his teachings, which are like ripe figs falling from trees. And the first of these figs is that his friends should stop thinking about God and think about the Overman instead. Zarathustra says God is a conjecture. This is not necessary to say that God does not exist. Whether God exists or not, any image or idea of God that is a human being may have is only a human conjecture, a hypothesis, a supposition, a guess. It would be impossible to determine whether there exists a God apart from the human interpretation, human conjecture. If one follows out the thread of Nietzsche's perspectivism, the truth of the matter would be irrelevant, as it is impossible to know anything apart from human perspective. Nietzsche's first point is that all of human knowledge is just that, human, all too human. To pretend otherwise, to claim to have the truth apart from any human perspective, is simply to avoid taking responsibility for the conjecture. All of human knowledge, whether of God or of anything, is a product of the human creative drive to interpret the world, as Zarathustra puts it, quote, and what you have called world, that shall be created only by you. Your reasons, your image, your will, your love shall thus be realized, unquote. What counts is not the truth of conjecture, but its consequence. One of the consequences of the Western conjecture about God is that human beings are regarded as weak and sinful and ultimately incapable of the kind of transformation that Zarathustra calls the overhuman. In this respect, Zarathustra's teaching is not unlike Buddhism, as the whole focus of religion concerns a transformation of human beings rather than worship of a god. The target of Zarathustra's criticism of the conjecture of God is the metaphysical supposition that true reality is unchanging, and all that changes, all that passes in time, and all that is impertinent is not real. Quote, God is a thought that makes crooked all that is straight and makes turn whatever stands. How should time be gone? And all that is impertinent a mere lie, to think this dizzy whirl for human bones, unquote. This again draws a comparison with Buddhism, for the transformation of the human being known as nirvana involves an acceptance of impertinence. One motive for the metaphysical denial of impertinence is that with change there inevitably comes suffering. As with Buddhism, the central problem in the transformation of a human being, Zarathustra speaks of the problem of suffering. The solution to the problem of suffering, according to Zarathustra, involves the metamorphosis of the spirit to the child, the creator. Creation, that is the great redemption of suffering and life's glowing light. But the creator may be suffering, is needed, and much change indeed. There must be a much bitter dying in your life, you creators. So they're pointing out the they're pointing out the similarities of Zarathustra's teaching to Buddhism. And that is not my wheelhouse. We just did the Kama Sutra. So I took a little bit of time in the Kama Sutra episode, and I've done this before, saying just like all this Eastern stuff is not my bag. It's not my bag. But I do know that Buddhism shares an awful lot of stuff with Gnosticism, especially this stuff on suffering. Where in Gnosticism, we're a divine spark, and we're accidentally or maliciously entrapped into this physical body. And when this body passes, if we haven't attained knowledge through personal insight, the knowledge of oneself, or the knowing that is gained, you get recycled. I think in Buddhism, you might get, depending on your karma, you might get turned into a dog or something, or like the next step down. And then it's like some kind of Pokemon-ish like fucking game. Like how low can you go? And then you got to work yourself back up. In Gnosticism, it's not like that. You don't get reincarnated as a dog or a giraffe or whatever. What happens is you get reincarnated as another person. So you're stuck. And I always think of it like, not that I have suicidal tendencies or anything like that, but I always think of it as this, like you lived your whole life without getting in too much trouble or causing too much pain or destruction, and you finally get to die. You finally get to pass away. You got your friends and your loved ones maybe with you going, hey, bro, it's fine, just go. And you finally just go. It's peace. Everything's just fucking awesome. You just float away into the nothing. You're done with all this bullshit. And then like 20 minutes later, the doctor slaps you on your baby bottom. Bam! Your eyes wake up. You're like, oh shit, I gotta start paying taxes again. The Blessed Isles, Grade Saver. Zarathustra begins a new set of speeches, not in the gentle way he spoke in part 1, but in harsh critique of the work that his disciples have tried to accomplish. Zarathustra reappears suddenly, comparing himself to a north wind that knocks down ripe figs from their tree. Zarathustra appears to his disciples during the fall season, but even with the beauty that surrounds them, he implores his disciples not to take joy in that beauty. Instead, he tells them to look forward to a future time, a time of the Overman. He must remind his disciples, and his teachings are for the coming of the Overman, and are not compatible with the teachings of Christianity or the teachings of God. His disciples, it seems, have fallen prey to these Christian teachings. They have attempted to make Zarathustra's teachings into a hybrid teaching, incorporating Christian version of the Overman, and Zarathustra strongly rebukes his disciple for this and tells them again that there is no God. And he tells his disciples that if there were gods, how could I stand and not be a god? Therefore, there are no gods. And Zarathustra teaches his disciples again about the power of envy. Zarathustra knows that if God exists, the rivalry between his teachings of the Overman and teachings of God would be unbearable. Instead, Zarathustra can see the future of his teachings. Therefore, God must not exist. For Zarathustra, death is a better state of being than possibly of unfulfilled accomplishments. I just want to take a second to say, here. In this teaching, Zarathustra again demonstrates the usefulness of envy. To finish this speech, Zarathustra claims it has been the poets of the age that have created God or gods, and the poets lie too much. Instead, Zarathustra compels his disciples to take glory in their depths and not in their everlasting life. This is the kind of poetry he muses that will help to create the Overman in this life. This is the kind of poetry Zarathustra himself seeks to create. All right, we're going into Sparknotes, and then the Existentialism Paper, and then Grade Saver, just so we're all still on track. The next speech is called On the Pitying. Pity does no one good. If we show pity and mercy to the unfortunate, they will come to resent us for exposing their powerlessness. This resentment eats away unnoticed at the insides like a fungus. Feeling joy is better than feeling pity, and learning joy, we learn not to hurt others. On the Existentialism Paper, this section focuses on the issue of shame and pity. Shame, according to Zarathustra, has so far been the history of the human being, or rather, it is with the doctrine of original sin that shame becomes the history of man. Zarathustra teaches differently concerning original sin. As long as there have been men, man has felt too little joy. And alone, and my brothers, is our original sin. In learning better to feel joy, we learn best not to hurt others or to plan hurts for them. Along with avoiding shaming others, Zarathustra cautions against pity. Zarathustra regards pity as one of the greatest dangers for the friend. But if you have a suffering friend, be a resting place for his suffering, but a hard bed, as it were, a field cot. This you will profit him best. Grade Saver says, in this speech, Zarathustra addresses those that think he has become too proud, and Zarathustra tells his disciples that this kind of pride is appropriate for a knower like Zarathustra. A knower. That's what Gnosticism means, by the way. It means the ones who know. And as Stephen Holler says, he goes, that leads to the question of, what do they know? That is an awful Dr. Stephen Heller impersonation, and I apologize to the universe for trying to do it. A person who does not know must compare himself to a person who does. But a person who is a knower can only seek to transform himself, ultimately, into the overman. This speech hints that the enemies of Zarathustra have made his disciples believe that they are foolish for thinking of themselves too highly. And Zarathustra says that this is not so. Quote, it is better to do evil than to think small, unquote. He says Zarathustra's enemies think small, but his disciples must become knowers. Only then will they become the overman. The point of Zarathustra's speech is this: a person should not take pity on or identify himself with mankind. The only way to become the overman is to harden one's heart towards pity for mankind. Instead, one should show people the way to become knowers, the way of the overman. The next speech is on priests. priests see life as suffering and so want to make others suffer as well. The uncertainty and hardships of life are too much for them. And so they have given up on life. They're little more than corpses, believing that their God and their pity are an escape. The Existentialism Paper says Zarathustra identifies priests as his evil enemies. It is clear that in his criticism of priests, it is the spirit of revenge that Zarathustra opposes. Because of this spirit of revenge, a religion that was based on the teaching of love became a means of persecuting others. Quote, they have called God what is contrary to them and gave them pain, and verily there was much of the heroic in their adoration. And they did not know how to love their God except by crucifying a man. Unquote. Gradesaver has this to say. As a group of priests pass by, Zarathustra takes a moment to show his disciples just how much the spirit of Christianity has distorted and manipulated the good intentions of mankind. The priests, Zarathustra says, are actually noble in intent, just as Zarathustra is, and are self-sacrificing, just like Zarathustra. And they seek something higher, just as he does. It is not the priest's fault that they are misled. The notion of the Savior binds them to false notions of pity for mankind. The priests are Zarathustra's enemies because they teach mankind to be obedient to God and to the church. Zarathustra teaches people to look beyond this to the goal of the overman. It is not the priests themselves who are wrong. They have much inner strength, but they are misled by the nature of Christianity. Christianity makes them doubt what they think, putting emphasis in their hearts and on giving pity towards mankind. And Christianity makes people believe that they cannot overcome themselves and they need the help of an outside God. Zarathustra teaches that one must become the overman by having a hard heart and envy towards those who are better. Christianity, Zarathustra says, is for those with a sultry heart and a cold head, which are qualities not to be found in one of his disciples. So, this is interesting. My first published graphic novel was called The Heart of Abracax, and I wish I could take it back. It's like, I wish I could erase that from history. But one of the themes in that book, and it was something I was struggling with at the time, was stop being a victim. You gotta stop being a fucking victim. And obviously that message has fallen on deaf ears because, you know, our culture today is like the victimhood Olympics. You know, whoever can demonstrate that they're a bigger, better, older victim than everybody else wins the fucking prize. And in another way, this is, so when I do these lessons and when I talk about Zarathustra, one of the things that I've become amazed at is how Nietzsche has predicted the rise of cancel culture and the rise of like social justice warriors. And I think that this is it. And I'm not the first guy to think this. Like, if you just Google search Nietzsche social justice warrior, you'll find some shits out there about it. But I don't see anybody ever talking about this one as like as a thing. They all point to the tarantula speech, which is coming up. I'm going to try to squeeze it into this episode. But I mean, it's everywhere in this whole book. He's predicting the rise of this cancel culture and this, you know, blue-haired SJW. This is very problematic nonsense. So I just think it's interesting. I wanted just to pull over to the side of the road and point out this thing where he's in this speech is basically like a cry out to stop feeling like you're a victim. That's what I get out of it anyways. Oh, let's do this. Okay, hold on.
On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode,
hear the names of white men and others who, it was said, had also met or seen these creatures. She went after these persons too and found out that in due course that it was so, and they in turn had not been saying anything for fear of ridicule. I withhold their names too, as I do not have permission of any to publish them. Said human kids on reaching the age of reason turned out not to want to talk about this abomination, while their parents were most definitely did not and do not want to talk about it. Nonetheless, they have talked a bit, and I pass it on to you for what it is worth. We've made 5 investigation trips and have, for evidence, a fingerprint lifted off a house window, including a plaster cast of a footprint, personal taped accounts of the creature, plus many interviews. This includes photographs. He is 7 feet tall, 400 pounds. That's a big motherfucker. Can move at tremendous speeds, jump tremendous distances. No news items concerning this being have been printed in the Portland papers. He displays extreme cunning, walks and runs. Whoa, this is personal. He displays extreme cunning. He walks and runs erect. Appears frustrated. Acts as if he would like to communicate. He makes extremely high-pitched sounds. But if you want to stay till afterwards, I'll tell you I've never talked about this. I told my wife about it last night at a campfire while I was deciding what I was going to do with this episode. So I've never told any very literally a fraction, like maybe 3 other human beings, this story. But I'll tell you my fucking Bigfoot story if you hang on after this.
support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com. Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Members of the degree of the Fulgar Correspondentia, alert. Please hang on until the end of this episode for a very important, if not urgent, message about the future and the state of the mailing list. On the Virtuous. Popular morality promises rewards for being virtuous, or at least preaches that virtue is its own reward. Popular misconceptions of virtue include being vengefully just, or being too weak to cause any harm. And Zarathustra suggests instead that virtue is simply a matter of putting oneself wholeheartedly into one's deeds, and is not done out of hope for reward or punishment. It is simply out of exuberance of being. All right, the Existentialism Paper says on the Virtuous, Zarathustra finds more signs of the spirit of revenge in the Christian teachings of eternal reward and punishment. Quote, alas, that is my sorrow. They have lied reward and punishment into the founding of things. And now also in the foundation of your soul, you who are virtuous. Great Saver says, Zarathustra now addresses his disciples' disappointing behavior during his absence. Zarathustra mocks his disciples for thinking that they deserve something for being virtuous in his absence. Zarathustra says that there is no reward for being virtuous. Not even virtue is its own reward. He tells them that their virtue should simply be a part of their being, not a series of acts done to gain some kind of reward. Zarathustra is attempting to awaken envy in his disciples by treating them like children who do not understand. Although he explained in a previous speech that his disciples should be proud if they have knowledge that others do not. Well, all right, I'm going to drink to that too. Here we go. Pling. He now reproaches the pride that caused them to seek a wrong path on the way of the way to the overman. The kind of pride that seeks reward from man is the opposite of the kind of pride that leads to the overman. Zarathustra tells them that through their virtue is like a child's toy. He will replace that toy with a newer toy with which they can play. Reading this right here, in my life, this reminds me of my attitude towards iTunes reviews, by the way. All right, the next speech we're talking about is on the Rabble. The multitudes of common people spoil everything they touch. Oh, this is another iTunes thing. Suffering from nausea, Zarathustra wonders whether this rabble might actually be necessary for life. By rising above rabble, he finds purity, peace, and a valuable friendship. The Existentialism piece says, Zarathustra says that life is a well of joy, but this well is poisoned by the rabble, those who are afflicted with the spirit of revenge. The most difficult thing Zarathustra has to accept in order to affirm life is the existence of the rabble. But it is not hatred that gnaws at Zarathustra, but at the sight of the rabble. It is nausea. Great Saver says about on the rabble, Zarathustra turns his attention to the masses of unenlightened people, and he admits that he actually abhors these people, calling them rabble. This leads to a bigger, more existential question for Zarathustra. Does life actually require this rabble? Rabble? This is a sickening thought to Zarathustra because it presents the problem that all of humanity may not reach the overman. If humanity needs rabble in society, well, I mean, who am I to tell Nietzsche what to think or to tell the Zarathustra what to think? But I think that if everybody was an overman, what would be the point of being an overman? That's just me. Zarathustra finds comfort in not thinking about the necessity of the rabble, but instead in envisioning a time where there will be no rabble. One could say that Zarathustra is putting his faith in a time when the overman will rule. Even if he is unsure that this future will exist, Zarathustra compels his disciples not to despair in the necessity of the rabble as he has done, but instead to envision their knowledge and their enlightenment that will blow among the rabble like a wind and steal their breath away with my spirit. Zarathustra's teaching is life to those who embrace it, but death to the rabble who oppose it and cling to the notions of Christianity, God, and the society that has been created from them. Oh, great. I'm gonna fit tarantulas in. So on the tarantulas, like I mentioned before, is like if you search out, I'm going to phase out saying the G word. If you search out Nietzsche and SJWs or cancel culture or whatever, this is the number one speech that shows up. But like I said before, I think it's peppered everywhere. I think you could see it literally everywhere. Not every speech, but it's in a lot of places. It jumps out at me. It's like a snake. It bites me in the ass. So here we go. Here's the biggie, as they would say. This is really a biggie. Can I borrow you for a second? This speech is problematic on the tarantulas. Zarathustra calls those who preach democracy, equality, and justice tarantulas. Secretly, they spread their poison of revenge. Do you see it already? By preaching equality, they seek to avenge themselves on those who are not their equals. Their life thrives on conflict and self-overcoming, and if they were to make everyone equal, how could we strive for the overman? The Existentialism Paper says, the tarantulas are those whose souls are poisoned by the spirit of revenge. Zarathustra addresses the secretly vengeful tarantulas, summing up his criticism of Christianity. For that man be delivered from revenge. That is for me the bridge to the highest hope, and a rainbow after long storms. And great Saver spake thus. Zarathustra gives his disciples a parable. A tarantula spins a web to coax its enemies into it. The tarantula then strikes with a poisonous bite. For Zarathustra, the tarantula is the teacher of equality, and one who says that all men are equal, but Zarathustra compares himself to the one who strikes at the tarantula's web in order to make it leave its cave. Zarathustra strikes at the teachings of those who preach equality in order to make them leave their cave and do battle with him. Zarathustra believes that those who teach equality are preaching against nature. Nature, Zarathustra teaches, makes some superior to others. But the teachers of modern moral equality, this Grade Saver goes on to point out that it's the teachers of Christianity. I am removing that aspect of it because I'm speaking to I choose to interpret this as Christianity, the teachers of Christianity, fine. You can leave that in there. They definitely have a moral high horse at some point in time. But I'm looking at it from a secular point of view, where people are, the purple-haired people are running around saying everything is so problematic. We need to talk. We need to have a conversation about equity. Hey, newsflash, if someone ever says that shit to you about equity, your red flag needs to go up because you are about to be fucked. Back to it. Sorry for the sidetrack. Proclaim that all people should be treated with justice as equals. This is foolish, according to Zarathustra. His disciples should not get caught up in such teaching. Zarathustra then condemns these teachers of equality as hypocrites, and he says that they all all they lack to be Pharisees is power. Yet through time and inequality, they have actually gained power. This is a distinction that Zarathustra says is key to understanding why he has to come back to his disciples. They were getting confusing his teachings and his teachings of those who promote equality. Zarathustra does not promote equality. He promotes the overman, the very essence of inequality. One person must become greater than the other. And envy plays a crucial role in this process. Zarathustra says that life itself is always striving to become more powerful, to make itself higher in other forms and virtues. By the end of the speech, Zarathustra says that he has been bitten by the tarantula of the teachings of equality, but he leaves the interpretation of the metaphor to his disciples. He hints that revenge is the necessary reaction to being bitten by such teachings, but he tells his disciples to bind him to this pillar, which is an allusion to Odysseus being bound to the mast of his ship so as not to be tempted by the sirens' songs. Here, Zarathustra does not want to be tempted into revenge by the bite of the tarantula of equality. He must continue on towards the goal of the overman and not be sidetracked by such things. The next speech we're going to talk about is on famous wise men. It is impossible to serve both truth and the people. Philosophers who want to please the people will inevitably end up justifying and rationalizing popular prejudice. Granted, their relationship with people is mutually beneficial, but the people have given up the higher pursuit of the truth. That pursuit, followed by true philosophers, carries no fame and no reward, only the suffering and the sacrifice that strengthen the spirit. The Existentialism Paper says, Zarathustra addresses the famous wise men, the philosophers, and their will to truth. Behind this will to truth, Zarathustra finds the will of the tyrant. The will to truth is here then opposed to the will to question, and the will to truth is linked to the camel spirit. Zarathustra leads the camel into the desert where the camel becomes the lion. This is in one of the first speeches, the Metamorphosis. Truthfully, I call him who goes into the godless desert, having broken his revering heart in the yellow sands burned by the sun. He squints thirstily at the island abounding in wells, where living things rest under dark trees, hungry, violent, lonely, godless. Thus, the lion will wants itself. Great Saver spake thus. The speech begins five chapters that deal with the wisdom and the enemies of Zarathustra who poses it. The first speech on the famous wise men is directed towards a group that Zarathustra names only as you famous wise men. And Zarathustra mocks these men and their wisdom because he says they serve the people and the people's superstition. He says that these men are not free spirits like he is. Their knowledge is self-serving and only seeks to increase the wise men's fame and glory. The importance of the speech on the rabble is again shown here. The famous wise men are only famous because they give the people what they want. The reader is asked to imagine the great philosophers of the modern age and the political rebellion that put into place for the people. The desire to have the people lift them up becomes a stumbling block to the famous wise men, making them servants of the people. And now Zarathustra says that they are tethered to their desire for fame and glory. They cannot be free wind as Zarathustra is. And this is their folly and ruin. The next one we'll do, maybe the last one, is the Night Song. Zarathustra laments that he is so full of wisdom, spirit, and life that he must always give and never receive, and he feels loneliness and never having to need anyone or anything. The Existentialism Paper says, whereas all the previous sections ended with, "Thus spoke Zarathustra," the next three sections are not speeches, but are songs. Instead of speeches that express Zarathustra's teaching, his criticism of old philosophers and preachers, these three sections seem to deal with the inner turmoil of Zarathustra's own soul. His beautifully poetic song expresses the anguish of the sun in solitude, in contrast to the night, where the stars are many. In the day, the sun shines in solitude. This section perhaps provides a key to the sun-like transformation of the soul Zarathustra calls overhuman. To become like the sun, and to have the gift-giving love that overflows like fountains, one must master solitude. The soul that sings here has not yet overcome the loneliness of solitude of the sun. The Grade Saver spoke of us. This speech is actually a song sung by Zarathustra. It is the first song of the book, and it marks a departure from the previous two styles we have seen in the book, that of a narrative and that of a speech or teaching. The song gives the reader an insight to Zarathustra's personal thoughts and motivations from an interior view instead of having to construct his inner life through his teachings. The song begins by lamenting the loneliness of being the only one that could bring this important teaching to the world. Zarathustra sees his calling as teacher both a blessing and a curse, and he feels impoverished because his duty is always to give and never to receive. Yet the love in his heart for mankind is beautiful to him as well. They are the things that both drive him and torment him. For the first time in the book, we see Zarathustra's own envy. While he implored his disciples to envy those who have great knowledge, Zarathustra himself envies those who receive. And he wishes that he himself could be the one who receives and is not the one who's always has to give. You know, he just wants a reach around, dude. The song ends as it begins. At night in the darkness, and Zarathustra's soul again breaks out of him like a well, and he desires to go and teach what he has discovered. So I'm John. This has been the Abercast. This is the Wednesday Book Club. Thus Spake Zarathustra, the lessons. I love this, and I talked a little bit about iTunes during the episodes because something's kind of bothering me. I got like half as many 1-star reviews as I have 5-star reviews, and it is very frustrating. I got a couple of great reviews. One lady said that, well, you know, he doesn't burp into the mic as much anymore. And I'm like, motherfucker, I haven't burped into a microphone in 2 years. So, I mean, just get current. And this other guy's talking about how I'm not a interview show, I guess. Yeah, guess what, motherfucker? I'm not an interview show. You want an interview show, just go. Throw a fucking rock. They're out there. This show, especially the Wednesday shows, are about reading, motherfucker. It's about reading because I'm terrified that people aren't reading. So you want an interview show where like the top people are talking about UFOs and all this other bullshit? Go find it. It's out there, okay? I'm John. This is the Abercast. Thank you guys so much for hanging in. I hope you guys are liking this Zarathustra stuff. I mean, it seems like you are. You're listening to it. So, great. Awesome. I really don't like the end awkward. I don't know what to do.
On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode,
to hear the names of white men and others who, it was said, had also met or seen these creatures. She went after these persons too and found out that in due course that it was so, and they in turn had not been saying anything for fear of ridicule. I withhold their names too, as I do not have permission of any to publish them. Said human kids on reaching the age of reason turned out not to want to talk about this abomination, while their parents were most definitely did not and do not want to talk about it. Nonetheless, they have talked a bit, and I pass it on to you for what it is worth. We've made 5 investigation trips and have, for evidence, a fingerprint lifted off a house window, including a plaster cast of a footprint, personal taped accounts of the creature, plus many interviews. This includes photographs. He is 7 feet tall, 400 pounds. That's a big motherfucker. Can move at tremendous speeds, jump tremendous distances. No news items concerning this being have been printed in the Portland papers. He displays extreme cunning, walks and runs. Whoa, this is personal. He displays extreme cunning. He walks and runs erect. Appears frustrated. Acts as if he would like to communicate. He makes extremely high-pitched sounds. But if you want to stay till afterwards, I'll tell you I've never talked about this. I told my wife about it last night at a campfire while I was deciding what I was going to do with this episode. So I've never told any very literally a fraction, like maybe 3 other human beings, this story. But I'll tell you my fucking Bigfoot story if you hang on after this.
support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com. Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
To the members of the degree of the Fulgar Correspondentia, alert. Due to a catastrophic, probably karmic, IT situation, the whole mailing list was deleted. If you would like to continue to access the infographics, the selected text versions of episodes, and exclusive art, I urge you to please re-sign up to the Fulgar Correspondentia immediately. I assure you that your email is safe and sound. It was just, accidentally deleted.